Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are tuned into the Joseph Benamy Show for Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024. I am your host, Joseph Benamy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight, Iran is now asking for new nuclear negotiations. So we'll talk a little bit about that. A great interview on that's available on the internet. Rudolph Giuliani and Dr. Phil. I want to talk to you a little bit about that tonight too. A bombshell. Nothing less than a bombshell. And I'm surprised nobody else is talking about it that much. Zuckerberg admits that the Whitehouse pressured Meta, also known as Facebook, to censor content. But before we get to all of that, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say this, okay? I don't know if you've caught this at all on any of the YouTube, any of the internet, social media out there, but this guy, J.D. Vance, that is the running mate with Donald Trump for President of the United States. Well, Donald Trump is running for President of the United States. J.D. Vance, of course, is running as his vice president. I don't know where this guy has been, but he's just exploded onto the scene. And the more I see of him, the more I hear him, the more impressed I am. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, one of the things that was puzzling people was why would Donald Trump choose this senator from a relatively safe state in terms of Trump winning the state and being able to take the electoral college votes from that state. Why would Donald Trump choose this individual for his running mate when he could have selected others that maybe might have helped him better to win in November this year? And I have to tell you, I also asked that question. As a political operative myself of many years, it's puzzling. But then I started to think to myself, the more I saw J.D. Vance, the more I'm thinking to myself, this guy is presidential material. I mean, he ticks all of the boxes. Former Marine, Yale Law School, coming from a terrible underprivileged background, broken family, drugs, etc. I mean, this guy is the American dream. My goodness, he's just risen. And now he's a senator in the United States, in the United States Congress. I mean, what more can you say about J.D. Vance? So I'm thinking to myself, why? Is there another reason other than the obvious questions about, you know, are they going to help us on our win in those battleground states? That's always the question that's asked. And it's a fair question because that's the way that vice presidential candidates are often chosen. But I'm going to suggest to you that maybe there's another reason here that nobody else has thought of. And that would be that Donald Trump, who expects to win, I mean, you don't go into this project to run for the president of the United States without some expectation of winning. And I think he's on his way to victory. I think it's going to be close, but I think he's going to win. So, this is my theory. I think Donald Trump thinks to himself, I'm going to win. I'm in the White House for the next 4 years. And then that's it. He can only sit as president twice. Who is going to be able to carry on my legacy? I think that choosing J.D. Vance, and again, this is just a theory, but choosing J.D. Vance to be the vice presidential nominee wasn't to help him, that is to say Trump, win the White House in 2024. I think it's entirely possible that he chose Vance to run with him this year in order to help the GOP hold on to the White House in 2028 and beyond. Because this man, J.D. Vance, is presidential material. As I said, he ticks all of the boxes. And let me tell you, he does these press conferences. He's quick on his feet. He pushes back respectfully, very respectfully, against some very hostile media when it's necessary. He answers the question. He knows the files. He handles controversial questions really well. He doesn't shy away from when he's made mistakes or misspoken or said things that maybe were a little off color. When he feels it's necessary to apologize or to walk something back, he's done that. But he's also defended, and he's also, stood his ground. And he does it really, really well. As I say, he knows the files. I've seen him handle questions out of the blue about the requiring real knowledge of whatever the subject matter that he's talking about, things that I didn't know about, and I follow these things pretty closely. He's good with crowds. He's great. He's great interacting with voters. There's, this morning I was looking at some of the news on YouTube because that's, I get my news from various places on the internet. I don't do the mainstream media thing anymore. I don't, it's not only can you not believe them, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, as you very well know. So it's not just that you can't believe the mainstream media. It's that they are so obviously in the tank for the Harris campaign. It's shocking how much they are acting like campaign surrogates in interviews with representatives of the GOP campaign or the Trump campaign. But that's a separate subject. The point is, I don't get my news from them, so I get my news from various sources around the internet. I spend some time looking at what's going on, thinking about it, talking to people I know that are on various issues that are actually involved behind the scenes in the very news stories that we are looking at. So this morning, I happened to be surfing around in that a little bit, and I came across a fairly long video. I think it was about half an hour, 45 minutes, just a camera following J.D. Vance interacting with people at a roadside restaurant, takeout restaurant. You know, the kind where you walk up to the window and you order, and there are picnic tables set up around the outside of the restaurant. And that A&W used to be this way. You'd drive up, and it was funny, you'd drive up to A&W and you'd order, and people would come out, the waitress or waiter would come out, they were on roller skates for Pete's sake. And they had a tray that would hook onto your car window, and you never left the car. Or the old Dairy Queen where you'd walk up to the entrance, and the kind, the chip stand, the hamburger stands. I don't do these things, by the way, because I only eat kosher food. Yeah, I'm not aware of any kosher chip stand along the road or anything like that. But the point is that these are just impromptu places on the side of the road, at a gas station, at a parking lot, whatever. So J.D. Vance shows up at one of these, and he's got a camera crew with him because, that's what you do when you're running for vice president of the United States. You've got media with you, you've got and camera crews, etc. So there was a camera crew that was following around, and they videotaped him for, I guess, about half an hour thereabouts. And he's ordering food for himself, and he decides he's going to order a round of cold drinks for a bunch of people that are there as well, just strangers. And he's talking with them, and people are coming up and shaking his hands, and can I get a picture with you? Can we do selfies? Can you hold my baby? and let me take a picture of you holding my baby. And he's so pleasant about it. And it's not, it's not easy being in that position. It's not easy, ladies and gentlemen, having a smile on your face and just being pleasant and interacting with complete strangers on such a regular basis. But he's handling it really well. And, he's natural with the press and everything. I'm just so impressed with him. I'm thinking to myself, where have you been hiding? Where have you been hiding? Now, I know I'm not talking here about policy or anything like that. And again, I want to stress this guy knows his policy. He knows the files. He's been able to handle everything that's been thrown at him, I think. And on one or two occasions when he hasn't had all of the information, he's basically said, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. The other thing, he's clearly been briefed on the need to turn questions around when he's dealing with in an interview, to differentiate what the Trump campaign is doing or plans on doing something on some issue, and what the Harris campaign has done, or the Biden-Harris record has been on that same issue. So, he's been technically very good as well. But it's just, I know I'm not talking about policy tonight, and I don't want to talk about policy tonight. I just want to talk about the human side of things. He's so much better than, he's better than the ticket, the Democratic ticket, Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz. Is it Tim Walz or Tom Walz? I can't remember now. Tim Walz, I think. So much better. And frankly, I think better than Donald Trump is. So, getting back to my thesis, when people say, why did Trump choose him? In fact, there was some talk that maybe Vance might be a bit of a drag on the ticket. The more I see of him, the more I'm thinking, okay, yeah, not only is this guy not a drag on the ticket, but this guy is already has to be the favorite, the prohibitive favorite nominee for the GOP in 2028. And if he wins in 2032, I mean, he's that good, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't had a chance, go on the internet, go on YouTube or Rumble or any of the social media and search J.D. Vance and get him. There are three things you have to get him to really get a good idea of this guy. You have to see him doing speeches. You have to see him when he's in the front of the crowd and he's doing a speech. That's one. The second is you have to catch him doing a press conference. That's two. And the third thing, you have to see if you can find some videos of him just interacting with the public at large. And there are a few of those videos as well. And if you do those three things, ladies and gentlemen, you will be impressed with him. Even if you don't agree with him, even if you're a Democrat, you have to be impressed with this person. You may never vote for him because you have party loyalty, or you may just disagree with his position on policies. That's fine, but give credit where it's due. This guy is a good politician, and he connects well with the people, and I just think that you're looking at a future president of the United States of America. All right, we're going to go for our first break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we are going to talk about the Giuliani interview with Dr. Phil. Another thing you can catch on the internet. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Joseph Ben-Ami Show. And you are tuned into the Joseph Benamy Show. I'm Joseph Benamy, your host. Thank you for staying with us. Got some of what I wanted to say there in reverse order. The my camera sort of popped up there without me being particularly attentive to it. Is that terrible of me that I would so easily admit that I wasn't paying close enough attention to whatever's going on in front of me? I was just checking out some texts and breaking news on my cell phone, my smartphone. And speaking about breaking news, and I don't have all of the details, but apparently the BC former Liberal government, which had changed its name, the party changed its name to BC United, trying to rebrand itself because it wasn't very popular. So they've been trailing or sinking in the polls. There's a general election campaign right now on in BC, British Columbia, which is a province here in Canada where I'm broadcasting from. So apparently they have now, they're not only just suspending their campaign, they're shutting their political party down. I'm flabbergasted. I've never have I heard of this happening. I've never seen it happen before. I've seen politicians suspend their campaigns because they realize they're not going to win. I've seen political parties decide they're not going to spend a lot of money or resources when they're facing a situation where they're probably going to lose an election. I've seen that kind of thing go on before. But to shut a political party, to suspend operations of an entire political party, I've never seen it before. Which just goes to show you, never in this business, never say, I've seen it all. And, getting back to my admission that I wasn't paying close attention when, the camera caught me by surprise, I apologize to everybody out there, including guys doing the technical stuff on this side. And is it a good idea to admit here when you're wrong about something? Well, I'm going to admit to you now that I've been wrong about something now for a few years. Rudy Giuliani. Now, I have a lot of admiration and a lot of respect for Rudy Giuliani. When he was mayor of New York City, he turned that city around. I don't know, if you had ever had the chance, if you're older, we're all getting older, but if you had ever been to New York City in the 1960s and in the 1970s, it was a garbage dump. I almost said something else, which I'm allowed to do on the internet, by the way, but I'm not going to. It was a dump. They had financial problems. They had huge crime problems. They had infrastructure problems. I remember going to New York City and driving through Brooklyn, driving through northern Manhattan, through Harlem, and it was like a war zone. Buildings that had been burned out during the riots of the late 1960s, still there, burned out shells. It was like a war zone. Drugs and crime everywhere. People think that Rudolph Giuliani's finest moment was in reaction to the attacks on the World Trade Center in 9/11. And I grant that, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't diminish that. But what people don't realize was how much of a real hero this man was prior to those attacks occurring, and what he did for his city. First, as a prosecutor, he was the district attorney for the southern section of New York, and he took on white-collar crime, and he took on the mafia, and it put a lot of serious criminal kingpins behind bars. And then when he became mayor, he turned that city around. Now, New York City is deteriorating again, in my view. But it's nowhere near what it was before. Nowhere near what it was before. That's the Rudy Giuliani record that I really honor. Not just 9/11, but his time as mayor, cleaning that city up, getting its finances in order, cleaning the infrastructure up, redeveloping infrastructure, getting crime off the streets. It was just a great job, in addition to what he did in during 9/11. Okay, so where is my mea culpa here? Well, subsequent to this, he was an attorney for Donald Trump, and he was at the center of the whole election fraud business that went on. And as a key person in that, I have to tell you, he ran some press conferences, and I just felt he was way over the top. He had lost it. There was, how do I describe it? Everything that he was, in my eyes, was severely tarnished. I'm not saying that there was no election fraud, but the way that Giuliani became, he became a bit of a parody of himself, I thought, and I just thought, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid, Mayor Giuliani, and I'm sorry that that's the case, because you've really undone what was a stellar and hard-earned and well-deserved honorable reputation. And now, up until now, well, this week I had the opportunity of watching parts 1 and 2 of an interview, one-on-one, that he did with Dr. Phil. And you can search these on YouTube. I don't have to give you the links. If you go to YouTube, do a search, Dr. Phil, Rudy Giuliani, you'll get all of the video. And I recommend it, ladies and gentlemen. I recommend it because he really put everything into context, and he completely, over the course of these 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2, he completely changed my view of Rudy Giuliani, restored, in my view, his reputation. And the most important thing is his explanation of the legal shenanigans that were going on around some of the cases with regards to election fraud in 2020. And other things with regard to Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and whether or not they've been involved in crimes and corruption. And I have to tell you, I'm convinced. I'm more convinced today. I mean, I realized that there was election fraud. I just, the depth of it, okay, I just never bought into the depth of it. I never bought into how serious it was. But Rudy Giuliani has changed my mind. His indictment of the election officials is devastating. Well laid out, carefully explained, no ranting or raving, no silliness, no leaking dye from his hair or anything like that. And he did a stellar job. And also, he talks about the corruption, a little bit of the corruption in the Biden administration, and himself as well, and what he's gone through. And I have no reason to doubt that the way he's presented his argument is truthful and factual. And he's restored his reputation, in my eyes. Not that it matters, but he's for sure restored his reputation. And if you have been thinking, if you're one of those people who, like me, was disappointed in Rudy Giuliani after the 2020 election, I highly recommend that you take the time, give him the chance to explain himself unfiltered. No twisting, no spinning of anything through the lens of the mainstream media, or the alternative media that may be his friend. Okay, they may be friendly, but they don't do a good job of presenting his side of the story because they're busy trying to use it to leverage whatever their positions are. Just Rudy Giuliani, unscripted, unvarnished, the human side of him comes through. He's honest and quite frankly delightful. And kudos to Dr. Phil for giving him the opportunity to make his case like this. You will not be, if you were like me, a Giuliani aficionado who lost that respect for him in the wake of the 2020 election and everything that went on around that, I highly recommend that you do this. It will restore your faith in the man, and it may disturb you in some other areas as well. But as I say, I very much recommend it. So that's YouTube. It's probably on other social media platforms as well, but I watched it on YouTube. I'm not going to bother putting the links into the description of that. A lot of people say that they're going to do that, and I'm not going to bother. You're smart. You can go to YouTube and .com and just do a quick search, and you'll come up with those videos. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Joseph Ben-Ami Show. Please don't go away. Welcome back. You're tuned into the Joseph Benamy Show for August the 28th, 2024. I'm your host, Joseph Benamy. Thank you so much for sticking with us. All right. So, what's going on in international news? Lots happening in the Middle East. And what I want to talk about tonight is the Iranian government apparently now saying that they are open to negotiations with the United States in particular, but with the West in general, hoping to find a common ground on their nuclear program. In other words, they want to come to some new nuclear agreement that apparently is going to, in return for certain concessions, they're going to make a commitment that they're not going to pursue an atomic bomb. I don't know why anyone in the world would believe these guys, but I guess they're looking at the situation in the United States and they're saying, is it going to be Trump in the White House come November, or January, I should say, or is it going to be Harris? And they're probably hedging their bets a little bit, and they're saying, it could be Harris, and it could be Trump, and maybe what we should be doing is we should be talking like we want a deal. Now, I don't want anyone out there, because there are a lot of people that I've spoken to who are saying they're afraid of Israel. They're afraid of the United States. And because Israel has demonstrated a certain military capacity to defend itself against Iranian aggression, so far, that is true, they have, and that's what's bringing them to the table. Or the Americans have made it clear that they're going to have Israel's back if Iran attacks Israel again directly from its territory, that is to say Iranian territory, as they did back in April. And the United States at that time played a significant role in helping to defend Israel against the barrage of missiles that had been fired from Iran at the Jewish state. And with the beefed up American presence now in the Middle East, they have a much larger military footprint, that is to say the Americans do, and that has the Iranians worried, and so now that's what's pushing them to come back to the negotiating table. I have a completely different take on this, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think that the Iranians are afraid at all. I don't think they have anything to be afraid of, because I don't believe that the Americans are going to enter into a shooting war with Iran. And even if they did, I don't think the possibility of that is really that daunting to the Iranians. I'm not entirely sure that they aren't completely delusional when it comes to their capacity to inflict harm on their neighbors. Certainly they have a well-honed, well-developed, well-designed reputation that has their neighbors freaked out a little bit. Certainly that's true, but I'm not sure how deserved that is. And I think what's really happening here, it's not deterrence. They're not reacting to deterrence. This is just part of their, what's the word I'm looking for? There is a Russian word for it, Maskarovska. So I can't remember now what the Russian term for it is. But it's a deception. It's a deception designed to distract, designed to take your eye off the ball. And when it comes to particularly the Americans and their opponents, the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians, those three countries in particular, have played the West and the United States in particular for a number of years now like a well-tuned, fine-tuned fiddle. I think that's how the saying goes. They're playing these guys like a finely tuned fiddle. They know when to show concession and when to show aggression in order to paralyze their opponents. Now, I'm speaking particularly about the Iranians, but I think that the Russians do the same thing, as do the Chinese. These guys are masters at fomenting discord, disunity, social conflict in those countries that are their adversaries. So what you see, so much of what you see on the internet, so many things you see on other social media platforms are simply memes. They're simply videos that have been designed and put out by our adversaries, not just American adversaries, our adversaries, in order to confuse us, in order to set citizens against one another, to foment distrust, discord. And when we are ununited, when we are fighting with one another, we're not able to react effectively to the challenges that are placed in front of us. And I think that what you're seeing with the Iranians now talking about coming to the table in order to resume talks about limiting its capacity or its program to develop nuclear weapons, I think that that is precisely what they are doing. They are playing us. And the Russians do the same thing, and the Chinese do the same thing. You know, so much of what we saw, the conflict that was stirred up over COVID, I can't help but think that a lot of that was stirred up simply by Russian disinformation on both sides. Or the Chinese, or the North Koreans. We have to understand the power that disinformation has. And then, and this is the real problem, is how do you deal with it? I don't know how you really deal with it effectively, because I don't want the government to have the power to censor the content that's on social media, because that's just an invitation to more corruption. And of course, that itself is an internal conflict within our society. How do we deal with these things? So you have the government and political parties on one hand saying we have to clamp down on free speech, and then you have the other side saying no. And all of this is coming back to, when you think about it, is why. Why are we having this conflict? Why are we having this argument? We're not having this argument because Joseph Ben-Ami does a show once a week. We're not having this argument because here in Canada, Ezra Levant has his Rebel News Network. We're not having this argument because Jordan Peterson, has a podcast. Or down south of the border here, any of our friends that are on the internet with their own podcasts. The argument is not stemming from that kind of participation in the atmosphere and the environment, in the arena of free speech and competing ideas. No, it's the blatantly false information that gets out there, and low information viewers and low information voters, without any kind of context, without having any kind of understanding of some of the issues, and I don't mean to be insulting of people, but of some of these issues, they believe what they're seeing, and they react to it. And so the desire to deal with that kind of blatant misinformation is not invalid. But when you give the government the power to do that, to censor what's the content on social media, and we're going to talk about this after the next break, because this is not theoretical. This is a very real situation. Because as Mark Zuckerberg has testified recently, and this is bombshell information, and I'm really quite surprised that it's not getting, I think, the attention that it deserves, even in the alternative media. I could get that the mainstream media maybe isn't going to pay very much attention to this, but the alternative media, I think they should be all over this, and they really aren't, and that surprises me. It's an example of how the government can take the power that some responsible, let's be fair, some responsible people out there who are grappling with the problem, who understand what some of this misinformation is doing in our society and the harm that it's inflicting on our body politic. And they feel they have to do something about it. And one of the ideas is, well, we have to find ways to allow the government to censor or to control that content. But when you do that, you open the door wide open to abuse, to a government using that power to advance its own political interests or to defend its own political interests. And we're seeing more and more of that as well. So it's a very serious situation, ladies and gentlemen. And the Iranian government, like other governments that are hostile to us, for whatever reasons, are very good at doing this because we're very gullible. A lot of reasons why we're gullible. Anyway, we're going to continue on this discussion when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, but we have to go for our final break. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Joseph Ben-Ami Show. And we are back. You're tuned into the Joseph Benamy Show for Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024. And I am your host, Joseph Benamy. And one thing I can guarantee you, we are not censoring things here. I don't know, maybe I'll think twice about that. Maybe I will censor some things from time to time that I just feel are just too far out there. But anyway, all joking aside, we've been talking about the Iranian government and their explicit desire to enter into negotiations, or their professed desire to enter into negotiations with the United States in particular and Western countries in general, in order to reach a new Iran nuclear deal. And of course, the Americans have already said, no, that's not really likely to happen. At least that's their public position. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes on this. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that they're continuing negotiations secretly, but their public position is, we're not going to enter into these negotiations. And of course, the result of that is that you have other people out there now in the political world saying, oh, how could you turn down this opportunity for peace in the world? This is how this works. And the Iranians are masters of this, as are the Russians and the Chinese. But it's not just Iran. To illustrate the problem, Mark Zuckerberg has now admitted in public that the government, the U.S. government, and in particular members of the Biden administration, Whitehouse officials, pressured him to ensure that the platform that he runs, Meta, which is the old Facebook, and I don't get the whole idea of rebranding Facebook, but whatever their reasons are, I'm sure they have good reasons. But in any event, they were pressured during the COVID-19 affair. I'm not even going to call it a crisis, but the affair. They were pressured during the COVID-19 affair to, just adjusting my microphone here a little bit, they were pressured during that whole affair to censor content on their platform. And the information that they would have been censoring on the platform had to be those people who were saying, it's really not so bad. This isn't the crisis that people think it is. There's no justification for forcing people to get vaccinated. There's no justification for forcing people to wear masks. There's no justification for forcing people to stay in their homes, literally, under what amounted to house arrest, widespread house arrest. So there was a lot of opposition to these measures, and reasonable, legitimate, valid opposition. And often people were putting out, sharing information that was not in line with what the government wanted them to know. And so Facebook and presumably other social media platforms were pressured by the White House. I mean, this goes right to the top, almost. They were pressured to censor the content of those people who were opposed to the policies that were being promulgated by the government at the time. It should be shocking. Personally, I'm not shocked. This kind of thing doesn't shock me anymore. But I am surprised this isn't getting as much play as I think it should. And it's not just not getting much play, it's not getting any play virtually in the mainstream media, but even in alternative media, it's not getting that much play. I'm surprised by that, because I think this is a bombshell revelation. And look, For all of you people out there that still think that COVID was a problem, okay, there was no scientific evidence whatsoever to support the contention that a mask mandate was effective. I still hear people saying, well, maybe it didn't do as much, but it was effective to a certain degree. I'm going, no, it wasn't. It wasn't effective at all. And that's the science behind it, ladies and gentlemen. And forcing people to live under essentially conditions of house arrest, that wasn't very effective either. And the corollary damage, the collateral damage that ensued as a consequence of that policy, we're still paying the price for that. But for whatever reason, the government did not want you to hear the other side of the story so that we could at least have an informed and legitimate debate about it. They just wanted to foment panic and then impose whatever restrictions that they felt were justified in reaction to the panic that they themselves were fomenting. That's how the game was played. Now, I'm not going to get into the conspiracies as to why governments were doing this. Okay? I don't want to talk about that. I don't know. I just don't know. But I do know that what they did was wrong. And I do know, we knew that there was censorship going on. But now Zuckerberg himself is testifying and saying, yeah, they pressured us. And hey, man, listen, I'm telling you guys, if they pressured Mark Zuckerberg, they pressured everybody else. And they got their way. The internet has been, I think it's been very, very positive for a lot of reasons. But as with everything, ladies and gentlemen, if you take a knife is a great tool to have. Very useful in many circumstances, but also quite deadly. And the internet as a tool is turning out to be very similar to that. It can be very useful, very positive, very informative. It is a great tool. But as with all great tools, the capacity for good is matched by an equally great capacity for doing bad things. So you have to be very discriminating, and you have to take everything that you're seeing, both pro and con, on the internet with a grain of salt. And that's the way I do it now. That's the way I handle the internet. That's how I handle social media. I don't believe things until I have some form of corroboration from independent and reliable, credible sources. I just don't. And you'd be well advised not to as well. And for goodness sakes, get your kids away from these screens, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? It's fine to have your children having a phone to communicate with, but there are so many options out there, inexpensive options. It's the smartphones, the videos, the chatting. Get them away from all of that. You want your children to have a phone to be able to communicate with you from time to time when it's necessary. That's a great thing. Get them, let's call them a dumb phone. Just a telephone. That's it. Just a telephone. Okay? No downloading of videos. No WhatsApp. No social media accounts. No. Just a dumb phone so that you can call them when it's necessary, or they can call you. That would be a smart thing to do. Just get the kids off of it. I don't know at the right age. I'm not even sure that adults should be spending so much time. I mean, if you go on a bus to work in the morning, take a look around you and see people on their smartphones. I don't know. There's something very seductive and almost addictive about these things. But anyway, that's a bit of a digression. The point is, you can't believe everything that you're hearing and saying. And when it comes to the Iranians, you can't believe anything that they're saying. You have to, your standard operating position with respect to anything that is emanating out of the government in Tehran is, I don't believe it. Whatever they're saying, the opposite is probably the truth. And if it turns out upon investigation that something that they're saying turns out to be truthful, there's some kind of an alternative, manipulative strategy going on that itself is playing into. All right, ladies and gentlemen, another frenetic hour has passed. So please check out the website, www.josephbedamy.com, where you can get record of all of our previous podcasts. While you're there, don't forget to sign up to receive our free email updates. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun, it's been informative, and we'll catch you next week. In the meantime, stay safe, and for goodness sakes, do not drink the Kool-Aid.